One of the counterintuitive things about Housing First, it really states very clearly that it's for people who are homeless for a long time and have multiple problems. It conjures up a picture in a person's mind of somebody on the sidewalk, with multiple shopping bags alone and maybe a cup, asking for money quietly and really looking like they're not doing well at all. And it's hard to imagine that this person can actually be in an apartment, like the rest of us. What we're not seeing is that that person has been on that corner for months or years and is surviving. They know exactly where it's safe to sleep at night. They know where they can get cleaned up. They know where the bathrooms are that they can use. They know where food is. When that person is given an opportunity to be in an apartment of their own, the transition is very, it's joyous. It's not only easy, it's actually joyous. This is housing first, but not housing only. The real work, taking care of mental illness, addiction, health problems, happens after the person is housed. It's also driven on a human rights approach, like housing is a basic human right. People with psychiatric disabilities have rights and should have a say-so in the sequence and provision of services, sort of the inclusion of the participant as an active member of the support services teams. We didn't know whether someone with active mental health symptoms would survive. Because there are no services on site. People live in regular buildings. We found in the first year about 84% of the people that we placed and supported staying housed. That was actually incredible, because I think the continuum of care was running somewhere under 50%. And it's like, hey, we're onto something. We should tell people about this, because this is an amazing thing. We just discovered that people can do so much better this way than the other way. And so we conducted a randomized controlled trial in New York City of 225 people that were homeless, for a long time, a year or more, had a severe mental illness diagnosis, and about 80% of them also had a co-occurring addiction issue, and they had health issues. It was exactly the group that we had targeted. We had a baseline, and then every 6 months for about 3 years. What we found was exactly what we had found in the first year. Actually, the percentage was, I think, about the same, 84 or 85% for Housing First, and about 40% for treatment as usual. It was a huge difference. We also learned that people were not using any more than they were in programs where abstinence was mandatory. There were no differences in the groups in terms of if you're allowed to use and it's not a consequence to your housing, like the rest of us. If we're drinking or smoking weed or whatever it is people do in their houses or apartments, if they're following the terms and conditions of a standard lease, no one bothers them.
So we had a qualitative interview data at baseline, and then we came back in 6 months, and then at 12 months. We asked them a lot about substance use in these rather long interviews. People in Pathways to Housing were 3 times less likely to use any drugs or alcohol, despite having harm reduction policies, than the treatment first folks.
The study showed that people got into housing faster with the Housing First program. Within the first year, 80% of that group that went to Housing First was housed, compared to like 30% of the control group. But once they were housed, the other thing that happened is that they stayed housed. They didn't lose the housing. Since that study, there have been over 26 randomized controlled trials of Housing First. And across the board, in all of these studies, the evidence is overwhelming. In different cities, in different countries, when you use these principles and this approach with the right housing approach and the right supports, it's a way to end a significant proportion of homelessness.
People drink and use drugs for a lot of reasons, but most of them said they use drugs and alcohol while homeless to try to escape the pain and the trauma of what they were going through. And so it was very moving for us to hear their many different ways that they stopped using, but the bottom line is the security of a place to live gave them the incentive to think they had a future.